This is Catholic Forum. I'm Bob Krebs. Bear Woznick is a world champion surfer, certified ninja black belt, and sought-after speaker. He is the host of the Bear Woznick Adventure radio program and EWTN's motorcycle-based immersive reality series, Long Ride Home with Bear Woznick. An oblate, Benedictine oblate, Bear is the author of several books, including A Surfer's Guide to the Soul, Deep Adventure, The Way of Heroic Virtue, and 12 Rules for Manliness, Where Have All the Cowboys Gone? That's his new book published by Sophia Press. We'd like to welcome to Catholic Forum adventurer, author, Bear Woznick. Bear, welcome to Catholic Forum. You're at home in Hawaii. I think this is the first time I've had someone from Hawaii on the show, so it's a first.
So yeah, we're here in Hawaii. In fact, I'm right on the beach in Waikiki.
Awesome.
And on the top floor of our condo building. And right below me, right next to me, is the altar at the Catholic Church. And I'm looking out now. I can almost show it to you, but I'm afraid I'll mess up the camera. But I'm looking out. Let me see if I can do it. No,
all right.
I'm looking out right now at Perfect Surf, and we've got a lot of sailboats sailing in right now. The big Transpac sailing event. About 70 sailboats sailing in from Long Beach.
Wow.
Racing. So we haven't held it in several years, so it's really cool to have them coming back.
That's great. I'm a little bit envious. I'm sitting in the basement of our diocesan building in Wilmington, Delaware. But
well, so we rode through that area when we filmed Long Ride Home.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're going to be talking about your new book. Before we get into that, just tell us a little bit about yourself, if you would, please. How did you get started in this life of adventure?
Well, I was raised in the Catholic Church. I had a tremendous conversion experience when I was 19 during the Wild West days of the Catholic Charismatic Renewal. And I was just sold out for Jesus ever since then. But I did have some confusion early on. The New Catholic Catechism, for example, hadn't come out yet. And I just didn't get the grounding that I needed in the Catholic faith. So everyone I was around me were Protestants, and I found so much joy with them and so much that love for the Lord. So for a while, I went into the non-denominational area and was leading youth groups and things like that. But then my father was out. My whole family went through this experience at the same time. But my mother and my father stayed in the faith. My dad became a Catholic deacon. And eventually he sent me Stephen Ray's book, Crossing the Tiber. Mm-hmm. Anyone considering returning or non-Catholic should read that book. And it's so cool. You know why? Because now Steve Ray's a good friend of mine. But his book, and quoting the early church fathers, is what brought me back. And, they say there's no one more enthusiastic than a convert or a revert. Mm-hmm. And so back behind me on my desk, you'll see a bunch of leather-bound books down below me. Those are Louis L'Amour Westerns. I have all 105 of his. And then further back is the writings of all the early church fathers. That's my radio booth behind us.
That's perfect for your book because you're talking about a cowboy. So
my TV show Long Ride Home, I didn't know it, but I stole that name from Louis L'Amour. And Louis L'Amour books, I recommend all fathers read those books with their sons because it's full of it's all about cardinal virtues. And by the way, the women in his books are always very strong women, which I think he might be the first one that ever wrote a book that portrayed women like that. But they're excellent that way. But I was moving my books around and a book fell out of my collection. And I looked at it, the title was Long Ride Home, which is what I use for my title for my TV show with EWTN, our motorcycle show. So I guess I stole it from him, but I didn't realize it. And then in my book, I use a Louis L'Amour quote on every chapter. And so I got to talk to his widow and ask her permission. And what a privilege to talk with him. So I think it's a great illustration. 12 Rules for Manliness. Where have all the cowboys gone? I think the cowboy virtue, we know it so well. And I just remember, and Bob, you know what it was like? There were men, when we were younger, men really held each other to a higher virtue. Mm-hmm. And the women did too. And so I just thought it would be really great to go back and illustrate the truths of real manliness by using our beautiful almost mythology of the Western cowboy.
Yeah. So tell us how this book came about.
Well, I was driving along Diamond Head here with my wife, Cindy, my beautiful bride, and she said, "You got to listen to this song." And she's a cowgirl, actually. She's from Florida, and she barrel raced. And there a song came on that basically says, where have all the cowboys gone? They're a woman who's really looking for a real man. And wherever I go and speak, especially if Cindy's with me, and it's because I speak to a lot of men's conferences, but also do a lot of work for radio stations and other places where there's a mixed crowd. Whenever we arrive, Cindy and I are almost, before we can get out of the car, there's women basically surrounding us, and they're saying one thing: tell the men we need for them to be men again, of every age. I was speaking in Boise, Idaho, and I was signing books. And this one, I was signing books, signing. Then I look up, and there's this, I would say, a man in his 70s, kind of a Clint Eastwood looking guy. And I looked and looked and looked, and I look up and I go, "Are you a cowboy?" And he said, "Well, I work on ranches." And his wife goes, "He's a cowboy." And then the next day we were riding motorcycles. I asked them, "Hey, let's put a few people together. We'll ride." And they had 60 people show up. And this couple was the escort truck. And at break, I asked her, are men today anything like cowboys? And she said, they're nothing like cowboys. And so in my words of my wife and in that woman's words, prompted this book to write about what real manliness is. I don't even use the word masculine because that's been so co-opted. And I like a little bit of saying manliness because it kind of thumbs the nose a little bit at those who think that there's some gender, continuum. Yeah. And so, but I really dig into a lot of the cardinal virtues here. Like, a man's got to have a creed, a code that he lives by. And I talk about how my own personal creed is that the most radical quest you can have in life is to abandon yourself to the wild adventure of God's will. That's my one word, my one sentence creed. But then I have rules that I live by. As a Benedictine Oblate, we have the rules of St. Benedict. And you think about, the Marines have a creed, always faithful, but they also have a code. And so the first thing I say is men need to know, what is it in one word? What do you stand for? What is your life really all about? And then break that down in how you apply that. For example, ride for the brand, be a man of your word, be dangerous, be lean and mean, build brotherhood. And I think one of the most important chapters in here is basically how a man treats a woman defines him. So break out what rules you're going to live by, and you should write those down. You should develop your own code and your own creed, and then pass that on, especially to your sons.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What is it you think about the cowboys? And I guess most of us get our image of a cowboy from watching the old westerns. John Wayne, you mentioned
old westerns,
Clint Eastwood, yeah, for sure. What is it about a cowboy that brings about the idea of manliness?
Well, first of all, they knew what they stood for. Making decisions for them was really easy because they knew what right or wrong is. It doesn't mean it was the easy route that they took, but it was simple for them to come to a conclusion of what do I do here in this moment. They rode for the brand. They were faithful. They once they signed on with an outfit, they were loyal to that outfit. Mm-hmm. And I wonder how many today of us, if people know who we ride for, are we faithful to? Do they know that we ride for? The Bible says all the cattle on 1,000 hills belong to the Lord. Do they know that we ride for Jesus? Are we branded? Do they know? I know, like when I had my cabin up in near Glacier Park, all the cabins in Montana, as you go into the land, the ranches, there's 2 log posts and then a post that goes across those, and it has the name of the ranch, and the brand is usually branded into that. And Christians, we have our brand. We have the cross. We have the ichthus, the fish. Mm-hmm. And so branding goes back a long ways. And then the thing about the cowboys, they're a man of their word. If they gave you their word and a handshake, that was it. And Jesus said, "Let your yes be yes and your no be no." So don't give your word lightly, but when you do, especially, by the way, if you give your word to a kid, mm-hmm. make sure you fulfill that commitment. And they were dangerous. People knew that you could only, they weren't easily provoked, but if you were going to call them a liar or a horse thief or spoke badly about a woman, they were going to stand up for him. And it's kind of interesting. I have that occasion happen a lot here where I live. There's a lot of tourists that get rambunctious, and I know, like, I'll hear a young man just using the foulest language, and I just make a point to say there are women present. You need to protect their dignity. Or if they use Christ's name in vain, I just say to them, the only name by which men can be saved. And we have had a challenge here, not so much anymore, but when a vagrant, gets in a woman's face, I have to be able to step between him and that woman. And my wife calls the police. But there needs to be a ability to know, and I mean this in a real way. Satan needs to know you're dangerous. I always say about my friend Jason Jones that when he gets up in the morning, the devil always says, "Oh no, Jason's up." You need to be able to do spiritual warfare. You need to bless your home with holy water. You need to be a man under the church's authority, and so that you're leading your family from the servant leadership point of view. But you should only be able to be pushed so far. And I'm actually saying this to the young men, or to all the men. You need to know how to physically fight. When it comes right down to it, are you able to stay in a fight for 60 seconds? So I'm a ninja black belt. I'm not saying that everyone needs to go out and get the black belt, but you need to be able and willing, when your family's in danger, to be able to physically fight. So, and then you need to have a plan. You need to have a dream. You need to have not just a dream, but a plan. You need to know what your personal telos is, what it is that God's giving you, the gifts and the skill sets and the desires, not passion, which is drivenness. The word for passion means suffering. You don't want to be driven by your passions. You want to be led by the upward yearning of God and by the desires and the skills that He's given you, what you're actually drawn to, as opposed to being compelled to, and not be afraid to set worthy goals, to set goals that will that you'll have to grow in order to become those goals. So an aimless, meandering wanderer is not what women want. It's not what the Lord is calling us to. And men need to build brotherhood. I know I'm kind of going on, but when I had my cabin up in Montana, when I first went on that 15-acre land, right near the North Fork, I was on the North Fork of the Flathead River, 2 miles from Canada. It was as remote as you can be without being up in the high elevation. And as I went on my land, the first time I got there, I saw a lone wolf. I mean, I didn't know it was a lone wolf. It was just a wolf. And he looked at me from across this little opening. I thought, man, I thought this was my land. Apparently this is his, And I would encounter him from time to time. And about 5 months later, I heard a noise outside. And I went out, and there was a guy. Basically, he was a tracker. He was a professor at the University of Montana, and I got to have a conversation with him. He was going by my house. By the way, he told me, "You're living on a grizzly corridor. That's why I'm tracking this area." But he said, I told him about that wolf. He goes, "Yes, I know that wolf. It's a lone wolf." And what a lone wolf is an alpha male that used to be that leader of the pack that was forced out by a younger male. And I said, he looked angry, he looked mean, but he looked a little bit scrawny. And he goes, "Well, a lone wolf, gets a disease or dies younger than he should because wolves hunt in a pack." And so all these men out there that say, I don't need brotherhood, I don't need to go to church, I don't need to go to a men's group, and they think they're tough because they're a lone wolf, they're going to be the first ones the enemy picks off. So we need to build brotherhood.
What my guest today on Catholic Forum is Bear Woznick, and the book is entitled 12 Rules for Manliness. Where have all the cowboys gone? And Bear, why do you think a book like this is needed so much in this day and age? What are some of the things that you see out there in our society that just screams, we need a book like this?
Well, I call them man boys. St. Thomas said the most effeminate. What his definition of a effeminate man was a man that just seeks pleasure. In Hawaii, we have a word the word is a powerful word. It's kuleana. And what it means is responsibility and stewardship, but all mixed in with a sense of ownership. That our kuleana really defines us. It's who we are, and we have ownership of that. And you can be born a boy, but it's taking on responsibility that makes you a man. and men run from responsibilities. They, the sweep right, sweep left culture of one night hookups and dating, maybe kind of going out with girls. What I get the complaint from younger women is they never ask us out on dates, and if they do end up going out and we end up dating, they never ask us to marry them. And then if they do ask us to marry them, they never set the date, and we never talk about having children, and that just makes them man boys. They're not men, they're children. They're the worst kind because they're a real bad advertisement for what a real man is. A real man takes responsibility, and in taking that responsibility, going through the adversity and the challenge of that is what grows them up and makes them tough, and it really is what makes them into the image, not into the image, but into the likeness of God, because we are all made in God's image, but we're not very much like him if we don't take Juliana.
What would you say to somebody who might say, if you're a committed Christian, if you're a Catholic that goes to Mass every Sunday, that's not very manly.
Oh, there's nothing more manly than being a Christian.
Yeah.
There's nothing more manly than being a Christian. I mean, wow, look at Jesus. I mean, by the way, Jesus was dangerous. He walked into that's why they killed him, because they knew he was dangerous. He walked into the temple with a whip, and you got to know how to use a whip. As a cowboy, if you don't know how to use a whip, you can hurt yourself worse, than anything else. But there's nothing more manly than someone who goes against the norm, who swims upstream, or goes against the tide, who doesn't take the so-called easy way. There used to be a saying, being an ascetic back in the day really was something that the monks of the desert, for example, they called themselves ascetic, which really means the word athlete. Athletes, they were ascetic. They were athletes for Christ. There's nothing, and the word disciple built into that word is the word discipline. And so the whole path to freedom isn't to do whatever you want. I get to go surf. I get to go sail in the British Virgin Islands. I get to go and speak because I've been super kuleana with my work. I've been a good steward, and that gives me a bigger life because I've taken responsibility. When you don't take responsibility, your life gets really, really, really small, and you end up in a prison. And there's no one who leads a tougher, more gritty life than a true Catholic or a true Christian.
What do you say also what do you say to people who might say, oh, this is just old-fashioned toxic masculinity?
Well, it's definitely old-fashioned. For sure, we don't want to go back to the toxic macho type stuff. That's not being a godly man. But if you mean by traditional man, if you mean a man who will lay down his life for those God's called him to serve, as a father especially, are you the type of father where you stand for something so that as your children grow up and they start testing the water here and there, are you a lighthouse? Are you lighthouses don't move. When your children vary from kind of what you stand for, do they feel that rubber band effect of saying, I'm stretching too far away from this norm that my father taught me? Can they see you in the distance standing for the light? So we need the word tradition, in the Catholic Church with a capital T, we embrace, and it's like a cowboy coming back after a long ride, in the cold, mending fences, and he left a fire there with the embers burning, earlier in the day. He goes back and he stirs up those ashes and finds that ember and blows it back into a fire, puts some more twigs and stuff on it. He'll blow it back into the fire. We need to go back to that, what people say is the ashes, and find that fire and rekindle that flame. And men, the world, don't be afraid to be a man. Don't apologize for being a man. You don't have to act like a tough guy. In Hawaii, the greatest, my son surfed 85-foot waves, but he's very humble. So a true cowboy is very powerful but very humble. That's really nobility. That's the nobility of the cowboy. We need those kind of men. The women and the children are begging for those kind of men to stand up and be counted.
That's great. How can our listeners get a copy of the book? I think you could probably just get that the best way through Sophia Institute.
Absolutely. We love Sophia. We love the people there. They published all of my books. And of course, if they want to, they can go to our website, deepadventure.com, or Amazon as well. If they send
Right.
to me, I will send them an autographed copy. The book you can buy now through them, deepadventure.com, or through Sophia, and it'll be delivered in about 6 weeks, or maybe
Okay.
2 months. Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. So when you're not writing, touring, surfing, riding a motorcycle, what do you like to do, Bear?
Well, I'll tell you, God's given Cindy and I like a new direction. We're discerning it now. We just finished our last season of Long Ride Home. It was filmed here in Hawaii, but the Lord just helped us get a sailboat, a beautiful sailboat, and we're keeping it in charter in the British Virgin Islands, so it doesn't cost us, really much. But we're going to go to the BVI's, and we're into the Caribbean, and I plan to sail and teach and hold have couples come and join us on the boat, and have a couples retreat, or have men with their sons come. And so that's become a real love for Cindy. My wife has a history of hundreds of years of generations of boat captains in her family, going all the way back to when they were pirates. So it's in her blood. And in Hawaii, if you're a surfer, you're really not a surfer, you're a waterman. You outrig a canoe, you spearfish, you sail, you do everything you can in and on the water. So we're kind of excited about that new adventure. People can go to deepadventure.com and subscribe to our newsletter, and we'll keep them up to date on all those things.
Well, our diocese is the state of Delaware and Maryland's Eastern Shore. So all of the Chesapeake Bay and part of the Atlantic is all part of our diocese. So if you find your sailboat in those waters, look us up.
Well, that'd be so cool. There's something about the beckoning of the sea, and when I look out at the ocean right now, I just think of the Catholic churches. We're 2,500 miles away from the nearest land. We're the most remote place in the world. You think about the breadth, and then there's 3 miles deep. 3 miles out, it goes 3 miles deep. That's the breadth and depth of Catholic teaching, and just to embrace that. And so but we always have felt that beckoning towards the water. But we all need to get on the same boat, the bark of Peter, and and be fellows on the same fellowship, and get ourselves and our friends. It's the only thing you can take with you is other people. Get your family and your friends to heaven.
Very well said. Bear Woznick, thanks so much for being with us today on Catholic Forum. God bless you and your work.
Aloha.